Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Alabama. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. The year was 1847 when the Blackwood estate stood proudly in Marengo County. The plantation was home to the unmarried Blackwood triplets, Eugenia, Eleanor, and Emmeline, who inherited the property after their father's death. Among their possessions was Solomon, a literate house slave whose duties extended beyond the mansion's library. The unusual arrangement raised whispers, but none questioned the Blackwood women. In spring 1848, a physician's journal, discovered 132 years later in courthouse archives, revealed a shocking truth. All three sisters were with child, each claiming Solomon as father. What followed was a scandal erased from Alabama's records until a history student uncovered letters revealing the horrifying truth. The Blackwood plantation, with its imposing Greek Revival mansion commanding a view of 3,000 acres of cotton fields, had been in the family for 2 generations, built on the broken backs of over 100 enslaved persons. County death records, unearthed during a courthouse renovation in 1978, revealed that Augustus Blackwood had been found dead in his study 6 months prior, his face frozen in an expression of such profound terror that the household slaves refused to enter the room to remove his body. The coroner's report cited apoplexy as the cause of death, though a personal letter to his wife, discovered a century later in a Massachusetts historical society, confessed he had never witnessed such an expression of pure horror on a dead man's face, as though Mr. Blackwood had glimpsed the very gates of hell opening before him. More remarkable were the subsequent actions of his daughters, as documented in property records and bank transactions that showed the triplets, identical in their pale beauty, with raven hair and unsettlingly intense gray eyes, seamlessly assumed control of the plantation's operations, making financial decisions and directing overseers with an authority unprecedented for unmarried women of their station, causing the bank manager to note in his private journal that the Mrs. Blackwood speak with one voice, though from 3 mouths, their unity of purpose as unnatural as their identical appearances. The first documented evidence of Solomon's presence at the Blackwood estate emerges from a bill of sale discovered in 1967 by historian Dr. Marcus Thibodeau while cataloging antebellum records in the Marengo County Courthouse archives. A yellow document dated the 12th of November 1847, merely 6 weeks after Augustus Blackwood's death, detailing the purchase of one male Negro slave, aged 26, called Solomon. Educated in letters and possessing fine penmanship from the neighboring Whitfield plantation for the considerable sum of $1,200, nearly double the typical price for a field hand. Plantation records indicate Solomon had been taught to read and write by his previous owner's northern-educated wife, a dangerous skill that would have normally diminished his value in the southern market but which appeared to be the very quality the Blackwood sisters sought. The ledgers of the estate, examined during a university research project in 1991, revealed an unusual notation in Eugenia Blackwood's precise handwriting. Solomon to be housed in the east wing adjacent to the library for convenient access to the collection and to facilitate his duties as correspondence secretary. This extraordinary arrangement, placing an enslaved man inside the main house rather than in the slave quarters, provoked immediate reaction from the local community, as evidenced by a letter penned by Reverend Thomas Hargrove to the Methodist Episcopal Church authorities in Montgomery, dated the 20th of December 1847, expressing profound concern that the Mrs. Blackwood have installed a male slave within their domestic quarters, a most improper arrangement for 3 unmarried women of quality, raising questions of moral propriety and potential contamination that cannot be overlooked by God-fearing citizens. The church elder's response, preserved in parish records, instructed Reverend Hargrove to counsel the young women on the dangerous impropriety of their domestic arrangements. Yet a subsequent letter from the frustrated clergyman reported that he had been refused entry to the Blackwood estate on 3 separate occasions. with the sisters sending word through their overseer that they answer to no authority but their own in matters of household management. Local diarist Mrs. Sarah Fleming noted in her January 1848 entry that the Blackwood women have become increasingly reclusive, their grand carriage no longer seen at Sunday services nor at any social function, while curious eyes report lamplight burning in their library until the most ungodly hours of the night. The breakthrough in understanding the psychological underpinnings of the Blackwood case came in 1979 when Dr. Elizabeth Winters, a researcher specializing in 19th-century women's writing at the University of Alabama, discovered a leather-bound volume in the university's special collections that appeared, at first glance, to be a mundane household accounts ledger belonging to Eugenia Blackwood. Upon closer examination, Dr. Winters realized the apparent columns of numbers and domestic notations actually formed an elaborate substitution cipher, with each numeral and household item representing a specific letter or concept, revealing, when decoded, a deeply disturbing personal diary spanning from 1838 to 1848. The decoded entries painted a portrait of a childhood marked by isolation and grief following the death of Isabel Blackwood during the triplets' birth in 1826, with Augustus Blackwood responding by withdrawing his daughters from society, employing a series of governesses sworn to secrecy about the family's private matters. Entry after entry detailed how the girls were forbidden to develop individual identities, dressed identically well into adulthood, and punished severely if they attempted to distinguish themselves from one another, with one particularly disturbing passage from 1840, recounting how father locked Eleanor in the root cellar for 3 days after she cut her hair differently, saying we must remain as identical as the day we killed mother with our birth, as though we are one soul split into 3 vessels. The diary suggested the psychological torment evolved into something more sinister as the girls matured, with coded references to night visits and the punishment of the 3-in-1 that Dr. Winters interpreted, in her subsequent scholarly paper, as evidence of ongoing physical and likely sexual abuse. Perhaps most revealing were the entries beginning in late November 1847, describing the sisters' initial interactions with Solomon, who is referred to only as S in the cipher. S discussed Milton's Paradise Lost with unexpected insight today, his interpretation of Eve's temptation revealing a mind far superior to any we've encountered in this provincial wasteland. When he speaks of freedom lost and the power of forbidden knowledge, his eyes hold a fire that resonates within all 3 of us simultaneously, awakening a curiosity Father always sought to suppress. We have agreed we must explore this connection further, as he may be the key to breaking the chains Father forged around our shared existence. The pivotal document that transformed academic conjecture into historical certainty was discovered in 1980 when the descendants of Dr. William Harris donated his personal effects to the Alabama Medical Historical Society, among which was found a leather-bound medical journal detailing patient visits from 1845 to 1852, including several entries regarding the Blackwood sisters that the doctor had apparently kept separate from his official practice records. The first entry, dated the 12th of March, 1848, recounted Dr. Harris being summoned to Blackwood Estate to attend to Emmeline, who was suffering from what the household overseer described as a persistent morning illness that had afflicted her for several weeks. The journal recorded the doctor's growing bewilderment as he was led into the sisters' shared bedroom, an unusual arrangement for adult women of their station, where he found not only Emmeline but Eleanor and Eugenia, all exhibiting identical symptoms of nausea, fatigue, and sensitivity to smells. Dr. Harris wrote with evident discomfort how his medical examination revealed the inescapable conclusion that all 3 Miss Blackwoods are in a state of familial expectancy, approximately 3 months advanced in each case, followed by his private speculation that such a synchronized condition defies medical understanding unless deliberately coordinated through some unconscionable design. The physician's moral distress permeated subsequent entries, particularly his observation that no gentlemen callers have been recorded visiting the estate in recent months, according to local society gossip, and the sisters refused to address inquiries regarding paternity with such synchronized coldness that I felt as though I were addressing a single mind occupying three forms. Most disturbing was Dr. Harris's account of how the sisters responded to his confirmation of their conditions, writing that they exhibited not shock or distress but rather a triumphant exchange of glances, as though my diagnosis confirmed the success of some previously arranged plan, with Miss Eugenia declaring, "The 3 shall become 4, and 4 shall become 7, a statement so bizarre and uttered with such ritualistic intonation that I felt a chill of genuine dread. The final entry regarding the Blackwoods noted the doctor's observation of a well-spoken Negro man who brought my coat as I departed, watching me with eyes that held knowledge no slave should possess, and I cannot escape the terrible suspicion that this household harbors arrangements of the most unnatural and forbidden kind. The repercussions of Dr. Harris's disturbing discoveries soon rippled through the close-knit community of Marengo County, as evidenced by church records from St. John's Episcopal Parish, which document an emergency vestry meeting called on the 20th of March 1848, where the minutes record Reverend Hargrove reporting that the Blackwood women have fallen into a state of moral degeneracy that threatens the very fabric of our Christian community. Town meeting minutes, preserved in county archives and examined by researchers in 1992, reveal escalating concern among prominent citizens, with plantation owner Colonel James Thornton proposing that immediate action must be taken to investigate the ungodly arrangements at Blackwood Estate, lest divine punishment rain down upon our entire county for harboring such wickedness. A hastily formed committee of 7 leading men, including the mayor, 2 ministers, and 4 plantation owners, resolved to confront the Blackwood sisters directly, but their mission met with unexpected resistance, as documented in a letter from Mayor William Preston to the county sheriff dated the 2nd of April 1848. Upon approaching the main gates of Blackwood Plantation, our delegation was confronted by no fewer than 6 overseers armed with rifles, who informed us in no uncertain terms that the Mrs. Blackwood received visitors by invitation only, and that we were to remove ourselves forthwith or face the consequences. The rebuff of such prominent citizens only intensified local speculation, as evidenced by entries in multiple diaries and personal correspondence from April 1848, with rumors evolving from mere impropriety to allegations of the darkest nature. The Journal of Shopkeeper's Wife, Mrs. Abigail Morgan, recounts how whispers of witchcraft now surround the Blackwood sisters, with Sarah Jenkins claiming to have seen all 3 standing naked under the full moon in the North Field, while her husband swears he heard chanting in a language not of this earth. The diary of 16-year-old Constance Williams describes how mother refuses to speak of the Blackwood women except to cross herself, saying only that unnatural women who defy God's ordained roles invite the devil into their beds. Parish records indicate church attendance swelled during this period, with Reverend Hargrove delivering a sermon titled "The Wages of Female Rebellion." Perhaps the most illuminating document in the Blackwood case emerged unexpectedly in 2001, when Professor James Whitaker, researching antebellum literacy among enslaved people, discovered an unmarked folder in Howard University's archives containing a 14-page deposition dated October 1849, recorded by abolitionist lawyer Theodore Parker in Boston, bearing the simple heading, "Testimony of Solomon, formerly enslaved in Alabama." The document, authenticated through handwriting analysis and contextual evidence, recounts Solomon's harrowing experiences after being purchased specifically for his literacy and installed in the Blackwood mansion, where he initially believed his duties would involve reading to the sisters and managing correspondence. According to his testimony, the arrangement quickly evolved into something far more sinister. The mistresses began by asking me to read poetry of increasingly passionate nature, standing closer each day, their breathing changing when certain passages were read, until Miss Eugenia declared that words on page had served their purpose, and more direct instruction was required. Solomon described how the sisters used their authority to isolate him completely. I was told all other slaves were forbidden to speak to me, that I belonged to the three who are one, and any disobedience would result in the severest punishment not only for myself but for the elderly cook who had shown me kindness. The most disturbing portions of the testimony detail ritualistic encounters that Solomon was coerced to participate in, describing how, on nights of the new moon, they would appear in their night clothes, hair unbound, carrying strange bundles of herbs and small bones, chanting what they called the invocation of multiplication, before compelling my participation in acts I cannot fully describe without shame. Save to say they involved all three women simultaneously, in a manner suggesting they believed themselves a single entity inhabiting multiple forms. Solomon recounted how the sisters spoke repeatedly of purifying the bloodline and breaking the patriarch's curse through the seed of the outsider, mixing Christian prayers with what he recognized as corrupted African spiritual practices they had likely learned from their slaves. His testimony concludes with his desperate escape after overhearing the sisters discussing how the vessels would need to be sacrificed once they had served their purpose of carrying the chosen ones, a statement he understood as a direct threat to his life once the sisters' pregnancies had advanced beyond danger of miscarriage. The existence of a so-called Blackwood curse first entered historical record through an unlikely source: folklore interviews conducted by Works Progress Administration writers during the Great Depression, when field researcher Mildred Thornton collected oral histories throughout Alabama's Black Belt region in 1936 to 1938. Among the transcripts, preserved in the Library of Congress and digitized in 1998, were three separate accounts from elderly residents who had grown up in Marengo County, all referencing a generations-old belief that the Blackwood men could sire nothing but daughters, and should a son be born, he would not live to see his first birthday. This folkloric element gained historical substantiation when the Demopolis Historical Society acquired a collection of 19th-century newspapers in 1962, including a brittle copy of the Alabama Planter from 1819, containing a brief death notice. Regret to announce that Marcus Blackwood, infant son of Augustus and Mary Blackwood, age 4 months, has departed this life, the third son lost to this unfortunate couple. Parish records from the same period confirm that Augustus and Mary Blackwood buried 3 male infants between 1818 to 1822 before the exodus, birth of their triplet daughters in 1826, during which Mary herself perished. Eugenia Blackwood's decoded diary contains multiple references to this family history, with one particularly revealing entry from December 1847 stating, "Father's obsession with our purity was never about conventional morality but about preserving what he called the female dominance in our line." He spoke often in his cups about how Blackwood men were cursed to lose their sons, how only daughters could carry forward the bloodline safely, and how we must never marry men of established families lest we birth boys destined for early graves. The diary's final pages, heavily encoded and partially damaged, suggest the sisters developed an elaborate theory that a man without family name or heritage, possessing intelligence but born to bondage, might provide the means to break the curse through deliberate corruption of the bloodline. With Eugenia writing that if we three, who share one divided soul, simultaneously carry the seed of the Nameless One, the power of our unified conception will overwhelm the curse. A marginal note, barely legible and dated February 1848, reads, "The ritual has succeeded. We feel the quickening in our collective womb. Father's curse will end with the birth of 3 male heirs simultaneously brought into this world, conceived as one but born as 3, each carrying the protection of our tripled essence." Dr. Harris's medical records, donated to the Alabama Medical Historical Society alongside his personal journal, provide clinical documentation of what must be considered one of the most unusual multiple pregnancies in medical history, with his official patient file labeled Blackwood E. containing detailed observations from April through September 1848. The doctor's initial notes express bewilderment at the sisters' physiological responses, recording that despite clear evidence that conception occurred at least 2 weeks apart based on fetal development, all 3 women manifest identical symptoms simultaneously, with morning sickness striking at precisely 7:15 each day according to the household staff, followed by identical cravings and emotional states that shift in perfect synchronicity. By the 4th month, Dr. Harris documented increasingly anomalous phenomena. Most disturbing is the apparent sympathetic response when examining any single sister. Upon applying pressure to Miss Eugenia's abdomen, all 3 women simultaneously gasped and placed their hands in identical positions over their wombs, suggesting a nervous connection that defies medical understanding. The doctor's frustration is evident in his May 20th entry, which states, "My requests to examine each sister privately continue to be refused with the perplexing explanation that what happens to one happens to all, and the insistence that they be treated as a single patient with 3 bodies is a concept so at odds with medical science that I find myself questioning my own sanity during these visits." As the pregnancies progressed, the doctor's notations betray growing psychological distress, describing how the sisters spoke in unnervingly coordinated patterns, completing each other's sentences or speaking in unison without apparent signal. The final entry, dated the 12th of September 1848, reveals both professional concern and personal fear. "Today I observed something I hesitate to record, yet I must document that when using my stethoscope on each sister's womb, I distinctly heard 3 fetal heartbeats beating in perfect synchronization across all 3 bodies, as though a single heart were somehow beating in 3 separate vessels. I shall not return to Blackwood Estate without clerical accompaniment." The historical record of official response to the Blackwood case remained frustratingly incomplete until 2015, when archival researcher Dr. Vanessa Johnson discovered a water-damaged letter while digitizing Alabama State Militia correspondence from the 1,842nd, a document that had been misfiled for over 160 years among materials related to Creek Indian disturbances rather than domestic civil matters. The letter, dated the 18th of August 1848, from Marengo County Sheriff Thomas Wilkins to Alabama Governor Joshua Martin, requested urgent deployment of no fewer than 20 armed militiamen to assist in managing an unprecedented situation at Blackwood Plantation, explaining that allegations of the most disturbing and unnatural practices have emerged following the escape of a male slave who has provided sworn testimony to authorities in Mississippi regarding activities that, if proven true, constitute offenses against both the laws of man and God. Sheriff Wilkins elaborated that local forces were insufficient given that the Blackwood overseers have established armed patrols surrounding the estate, turning away all visitors and preventing any communication with the 3 sisters, who are rumored to be in advanced stages of simultaneous pregnancies with no lawful father identified. The letter outlines a planned raid scheduled for August 25th, with detailed tactical considerations including approach from 3 directions simultaneously, with the main force to advance along the southern road while smaller contingents circle from east and west to prevent escape through the cypress swamp that borders the northern property line. Most intriguingly, Sheriff Wilkins requested that the militia bring a physician experienced in cases of mental aberration. As the behavior described suggests, the Blackwood women may be suffering from a shared delusion of religious or supernatural nature, as well as a clergyman of strong constitution, as we may encounter scenes that require spiritual interpretation beyond my humble capacity to comprehend. What makes this document particularly tantalizing to historians is that no follow-up correspondence has ever been located, no official report of the raid exists in county records, and the governor's response, if any was sent, has never been found, creating a documentary void precisely at the moment when official intervention would have occurred. A silence that historian Dr. Johnson has called less an absence of evidence than evidence of deliberate erasure from the historical record. The official documentation of the Blackwood births appears in the St. John's Episcopal Parish Registry, discovered during church renovations in 1972, where 3 separate entries dated October 14, October 21, and the 2nd of November 1848 record the baptisms of male infants named Augustus, Alexander, and Aaron Blackwood, each bearing the notation Mother, followed by the respective names Eugenia, Eleanor, and Emmeline Blackwood, with the space for father conspicuously blank in all 3 cases. The parish priest, Father Jonathan Miller, included an unusual marginal note beside these entries. Baptism performed at Blackwood Estate under duress. God forgive me for what I witnessed therein. These sterile church records stand in stark contrast to Dr. Harris's final journal entry, dated the 3rd of November 1848, which scholars have noted was written in a noticeably shaky hand unlike his previous meticulous penmanship. I have this night witnessed the culmination of the Blackwood abomination, having been summoned to attend the 3rd birth within a fortnight, each delivery proceeding in identical fashion, despite occurring in different women, with the same unsettling complications I dare not detail in full. The doctor's distress escalates throughout the entry as he describes how the sisters insisted on being present at each other's deliveries, forming a triangle around the birthing bed, chanting in low voices while the laboring sister pushed forth her unholy issue, and notes with horror that all 3 infants bear identical birthmarks across their left shoulders, a pattern resembling no natural formation I have encountered in 30 years of medical practice. Most disturbing is the doctor's observation that the infant's eyes, when briefly opened, revealed not the milky blue of newborns but a startling gray intensity identical to their mother's, carrying an awareness no newborn should possess, fixing upon me with such collective knowing that I felt my soul shrink beneath their gaze. The journal abruptly ends with his declaration of immediate resignation and intention to depart for Tennessee, as he could no longer practice in a community where such abominations walk unpunished. County records confirm Dr. Harris sold his practice and property on the 7th of November, 1848, departing so hastily that several patient accounts remained uncollected. The most perplexing aspect of the Blackwood case emerges in the historical record as a conspicuous absence, first noted by genealogist Martha Conroy in 1998 while comparing the 1,840 and 1,850 federal census records for Marengo County, where the Blackwood family, previously listed with Augustus as head of household in 1840 and expected to show the triplets with their children in 1850, had vanished entirely, with census takers noting simply abandoned beside the property listing. County tax records from May 1849 indicate the annual plantation taxes went unpaid, initiating a legal process to determine ownership that remained unresolved for nearly a decade due to what court documents cryptically referred to as unusual circumstances preventing normal transfer of title. The local newspaper, the Marengo Gazette, published a brief item on the 3rd of June 1849, stating that the once grand Blackwood estate now stands empty, with reports indicating the Mrs. Blackwood departed in the night some months past, taking with them their household goods, personal effects, and the entirety of their human property, leaving behind not so much as a handkerchief to mark their former presence. Oral histories collected from formerly enslaved people during the Federal Writers' Project in the 1932nd include the account of Bessie Williams, who was a child on a neighboring plantation in 1849. Nobody saw them Blackwood ladies leave. One day, smoke coming from the chimneys, servants working in the yard, everything normal as can be. Next morning, not a soul, no wagons heard, no horses, nothing. Just empty house with the doors standing wide open and not a living thing left inside, like they all just vanished into thin air. Most unsettling are the folk accounts compiled by local historian Jeremiah Tate in his 1892 volume Marengo County Legends and Lore, which document numerous reports from 1,850 through 1,870 of travelers passing the abandoned Blackwood property after sunset, hearing the synchronized wailing of 3 infants emanating from the empty pond structure, followed by the hushed voices of women speaking in unison, though no living soul has resided on the property for a generation. County records confirm the plantation remained officially abandoned until 1871, when the land was finally auctioned by the state to settle decades of back taxes, the once impressive mansion having fallen into such disrepair that it was deemed worthless and subsequently demolished. The Blackwood mystery took a macabre turn in 2008 when the University of Alabama's Department of Anthropology conducted an archaeological survey of the former plantation site as part of a broader study on antebellum architectural remains, revealing findings so disturbing that the principal investigator, Dr. Rebecca Coleman, later admitted to considering abandoning academia altogether. According to the official excavation report, published in the Southern Journal of Archaeology, after considerable internal debate about ethical implications, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath what had been the main house foundation, leading to the discovery of a sealed brick chamber approximately 6 feet square beneath where the library had once stood. Inside this chamber, excavators found 3 small skeletal remains arranged in a triangular formation, determined through forensic analysis to be male infants aged between 4 and 6 months at time of death, with each positioned atop a copper plate etched with symbols combining Christian iconography, West African Yoruba religious motifs, and what folklore specialist Dr. Thomas Barton identified as corrupted Masonic imagery, suggesting an attempt to create a syncretic protective ritual. More disturbing were the additional artifacts surrounding the remains. 3 identical silver lockets containing what DNA testing confirmed to be hair from the Blackwood triplets. A manuscript written in the same cipher found in Eugenia's diary, which remains only partially decoded but contains repeated references to vessels, purification, and the true air, and most unsettlingly, a glass vial containing preserved umbilical cord tissue wrapped in red thread. The forensic analysis, conducted at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, yielded perplexing results that lead researcher Dr. Samantha Wu described as genetically improbable if not impossible, explaining in her report that mitochondrial DNA from all 3 infants shows identical maternal lineage consistent with the triplets' genetic profile extracted from their hair samples, while paternal DNA markers show significant sequence similarities to the maternal line, suggesting a degree of consanguinity that complicates traditional notions of parentage. Carbon dating placed the remains interment at approximately 1,849, while soil analysis indicated the presence of unusual mineral deposits containing traces of mercury, belladonna, and mandrake root, substances associated with both medicinal and occult practices of the period. The discovery prompted Alabama state authorities to designate the site as both a crime scene and historical landmark, though no charges could be filed given the centuries-long interval and absence of identifiable perpetrators. The Blackwood narrative gained its most significant modern development in July 2018, when contractors renovating a Boston townhouse discovered a cache of 27 letters sealed within a hidden wall compartment, correspondence that architectural historians confirmed had remained untouched since approximately 1852. The letters, now preserved in the Massachusetts Historical Society, document the sisters' flight northward following the events of late 1848, with the earliest dated February 1849, sent from a Philadelphia boarding house where they had apparently arrived with only one male child, referred to consistently as the chosen vessel, or simply the heir. Historian Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who analyzed the correspondence, noted the increasingly fractious relationship between the sisters. Eugenia's hand dominates the earliest letters, addressing Eleanor with contempt for losing your resolve and allowing your vessel to fail, suggesting at least one infant had perished before their departure from Alabama, while Emmeline's contributions diminish progressively until her handwriting vanishes entirely by June 1849. Most disturbing is a letter dated August 1849, bearing water stains later confirmed as human blood, in which Eugenia writes, "The pretender has been dealt with as necessity demanded." Only my son carries the true lineage, as proven by his bearing the mark most prominently. Your continued questioning of this self-evident truth has forced my hand in ways I cannot apologize for. The final letters reveal the complete dissolution of their once unified identity. With Eleanor writing, "We who were once three in one are now irrevocably severed. I cannot forgive what you have done to Emmeline, whose screams still echo in my dreams." The correspondence ends abruptly in December 1849 with Eugenia's chilling declaration: "What our father began through careful breeding across generations, I shall bring to fruition alone. The vessel thrives and shows signs of the gifts we predicted. The Blackwood line shall achieve its destiny through my guidance alone, and future generations will not know your weakness marred the purity of our great work." The genealogical threads of the Blackwood saga were finally unraveled in 2019, when DNA ancestry researcher Dr. Jonathan Miller published his groundbreaking study, Genetic Echoes, tracing the Blackwood lineage. Documenting his 5-year investigation that began with Boston municipal records showing Eugenia Blackwood using the married name Mrs. Eugenia Black enrolled a son named Augustus in a private academy in 1859. Census records tracked this child to adulthood, marriage, and subsequent generations, leading to 23 living descendants scattered across New England and the Midwest, 7 of whom participated in Dr. Miller's research through interviews and DNA sampling. The genetic analysis revealed what Dr. Miller termed a pattern of unusual chromosomal markers suggesting a history of deliberate consanguinity stretching back multiple generations before the triplets, supporting the theory that Augustus Blackwood had systematically bred relatives with specific genetic traits over decades, a practice his daughter Eugenia apparently continued. Medical records from the participating descendants revealed a statistically improbable concentration of rare conditions: 6 cases of heterochromia, different colored eyes, 4 instances of polydactyly, extra fingers or toes, and 9 documented cases of synesthesia, sensory crossover, where stimulation of one sense triggers another. Most significant was the consistent pattern of male infant mortality throughout the family tree, with descendants reporting that 42% of male children died before their first birthday, primarily from a congenital cardiac defect, now identifiable as long QT syndrome, a hereditary condition causing sudden cardiac arrest. Descendant Margaret Thornton, interviewed for the PBS documentary America's Hidden Bloodlines, described family stories passed down through generations. "My grandmother would warn pregnant women in the family to pray for daughters, for Blackwood sons rarely see a second summer," though none of us knew the historical weight behind that saying until Dr. Miller's research. Another descendant, retired physician Dr. Robert Black, recounted his shock upon learning his family history. "As a medical professional, I immediately recognized we weren't dealing with a supernatural curse, but a dominant genetic disorder affecting cardiac development specifically in male infants, precisely what Augustus Blackwood would have observed. As his sons died one after another, lacking the medical understanding to recognize it as anything but divine punishment." The most revelatory document in the entire Blackwood saga emerged in June 2023, when Canadian archivist Dr. Marie Laurent discovered a 127-page handwritten memoir entitled A True Account of Abominations, witnessed at Blackwood Plantation, among uncatalogued abolitionist papers in the Toronto Historical Society. Authenticated as Solomon's complete testimony through handwriting analysis and contextual evidence, this exhaustive account, now published with extensive scholarly annotation, reveals horrors exceeding even the most disturbing speculations, detailing how Augustus Blackwood, educated in medicine at Edinburgh before inheriting his father's plantation, had conducted systematic breeding experiments with enslaved people for over 30 years, meticulously recording traits, outcomes, and genetic improvements in ledgers that Solomon had been forced to maintain after demonstrating literacy. Most shocking was Solomon's revelation that the triplets themselves were the product of Augustus breeding with his own half-sister, who had been raised separately and unaware of their relationship after previous revelation. Experiments convinced him that concentrated bloodlines produced the exceptional qualities he sought to cultivate, qualities that manifested in the triplets' unusual mental connection and identical appearance. The memoir recounts how the sisters discovered their father's research after his death, initially reacting with horror before becoming fascinated with his theories of human improvement and developing their own twisted interpretation that incorporated elements of folk religion from the plantation's enslaved community with their father's pseudo-scientific writings. Solomon's testimony culminates in his description of a conversation overheard between Eugenia and Eleanor as they planned their northern escape. Miss Eugenia declared that the weaker vessels must be eliminated to preserve the purity of the experiment, that only the strongest child would be taken north to continue what she called the great work, stating that her father had merely laid the foundation for a dynasty that would eventually produce beings of unprecedented abilities through controlled breeding across generations. The memoir concludes with Solomon's haunting warning, written in 1876 shortly before his death. I write this account knowing that somewhere in this world, the Blackwood lineage continues through that surviving child, and I fear that the unholy knowledge contained in Augustus Blackwood's research has not perished but merely gone dormant, awaiting another generation to continue experiments that violate all natural and divine law. For evil knowledge, once discovered, is rarely truly lost but merely hidden, waiting for new hands to wield its terrible power.